Welcome to Improve Your English Writing video number 8. This video is going to cover the 3-step writing process, specifically step number 2, which is the first draft, and just a portion of the first draft, and it's going to cover sentence types. So if you want to get notifications to this series, please click subscribe. If you like the video or think others will find the video useful, please hit like. And please check out links to books and videos in the description. So sentence types. So the sentence is the fundamental unit of writing. And knowing these sentence types or patterns will help you craft better and correct sentences. Just a story from my own career. I've said before I'm actually an engineer in California, but I had a technician many years ago, probably about 15, 20 years ago, when I used to meet with my engineers, I did share with them over a couple of weeks these sentence writing patterns to improve their English. So this is what I remember. I do remember sharing some English a sentence or grammar stuff when I remember sharing this. And then he retired about a year ago, and he actually thanked me. He actually wrote me an email, and part of his email actually thanked him for sharing, for improving his writing. So I personally believe this is a video which can greatly improve your writing. Once you see the sentence patterns, you can just apply these patterns in your writing and you will produce much better and correct sentences. So that's why I spent so much long on that bullet item. It really has shown to be, a huge, or can greatly improve your writing. So let's get down to it. So there are 4 fundamental sentence types. There's a simple sentence, a compound sentence, and I'm also going to cover a compound predicate. I'm going to cover a comma splice, which is a incorrect sentence type, because you see it all the time. I'm going to cover a run-on, which is actually not a good sentence type, but since you see it, I will cover it. There's a complex sentence and a compound complex sentence. So the ones in blue are the actual 4 sentence types, and under compound, I'm going to cover some specific variations on this compound sentence type. One which is correct, compound predicate, but these other 2, comma splicing and run-on, are not proper sentences, but I will cover them. So a simple sentence. What is a simple sentence? So the first type of sentence, a simple sentence, consists of one independent clause and no dependent clauses. So once again, an independent clause does not start with a subordinating conjunction. So it has a subject and a predicate. If you want to translate the verb, subject and verb, and it does not start with a subordinating conjunction. So examples. Just a little tidbit. A sentence actually may begin with a coordinating conjunction. Some people say it cannot. It actually can. Usually it starts with and or but do not overuse starting a sentence this way. You cannot start every 5th sentence this way. Most guides will, style guides will say it is okay to start it with a coordinating conjunction, but don't overuse it. So examples of a simple sentence are, she kicked the ball. So I think we've been over this, we've broken this down to verb and subject and things like that. So this has a subject and verb, and it does not start with a subordinating conjunction. Another example, I gave him money for a loan. So once again, this is an independent clause. One independent clause is a simple sentence. Okay, so what is a compound sentence? Well, a compound sentence is 2 or more independent clauses with no dependent clauses. So, and the 2 independent, so the definition is it can be 2 or more independent clauses, but generally you only have 2 independent clauses. In most cases, you're only going to have 2, and 2 independent clauses may be separated, or you can sometimes say joined, in the following 3 ways. You can use a comma and a coordinating conjunction between the 2 independent clauses. So, and when either independent clause contains a comma, consider, not always, consider using a semicolon between the clauses. So here, see how I'm giving the almost the grammar and the punctuation to form a pattern. So here it is. You use a comma with a coordinating conjunction, but if you start to have too many commas, use a semicolon. And see rule 10 and 20. Now I know I haven't made those videos, but they are in my book. I will get down to these rules. And then I actually use what's called the three's a crowd principle. This is just my own rules. This is not even in the book. If there's 3 commas, I generally think it's too many. So I have the 3 comma rule. So once you have 3, there's too many. So let's see some examples. So here you have, I went to the store to get groceries and I saw a friend from high school. These are independent clauses. So you can separate them or join them depending on your point of view. You use a comma and a coordinating conjunction. So comma and. I went to the store to get groceries, comma, and I saw a friend from high school. That's the pattern. This is a compound sentence. Here's an example where I use a semicolon because there's too many commas. Remember my three's a crowd. This is just me. I say three's a crowd. That's just my rule. So here you have I went to the store and bought eggs, milk, and bread. That's actually an independent clause. And I saw a friend from high school. That's also an independent clause. So normally, just like the previous sentence, you could use a comma coordinating conjunction. But once again, once you start having too many commas, because the reason you use a semicolon is because it's you start to lose what's happening with it. This was just a comma here. Since you have these commas here, you're not too sure what this comma is doing. Is it separating just another series of here we're using commas to separate items into series. So when you get to this comma, you're not too sure if you're separating another item in the series or if you're actually starting a new, an independent clause is going to follow. So since there's too many commas, you can use a semicolon. So those are the 2 patterns. Here are 2 patterns for separating compound sentences. The second way you can separate or join 2 independent clauses in a compound sentence are use a semicolon without a coordinating conjunction. But these independent clauses should be closely related in content, meaning, or grammar. If not, use a period. So to use a semicolon between 2 independent clauses, they need to be closely related in this fashion, content, meaning, or grammar. If not, just use a period. So here's some examples. Now, it could be debated if these 2 are closely related. Probably not. You can put a semicolon here, but it's probably not best. But this is just for illustration of showing you there's an independent clause, a semicolon, and an independent clause. And the third way you can do it is a semicolon, a conjunctive adverb or transitional expression, and a comma. Remember, when I went through the grammar, my grammar section or videos, I sort of lumped these 2 together. I said in those videos, the reason I do that is because they're punctuated the same way. So it doesn't really matter if it's a conjunctive adverb or a transitional expression. They're punctuated in the same way. So let's see some examples. So semicolon, conjunctive adverb, semicolons, conjunctive adverb, or a transitional expression, and a comma. But you do not place a comma after the conjunctive adverbs hence, then, thus, so, and yet. And just a note, a period may always be used instead of a semicolon. So let's look at some examples. So if this doesn't really crystal clear, look at the examples and read the definition again. It'll make a lot more sense. So once again, the words in black are the independent clauses. So here I've separated them with a semicolon, a conjunctive adverb, and a comma. Then here's, once again, I use a conjunctive adverb, but this is one of the, what was it, 2, 4, 5 that you do not use a comma for. In many cases, one of the ways I use to memorize this is they're all monosyllable. They're only one syllable. I think there's a few, this is not always true, but it's very useful to say, oh, they're all, one syllable conjunctive adverbs. So like this is, is more than one syllable, one syllable. Not always true, but it's the way I help memorize it when I can't remember all, all the conjunctive adverbs. So here you would use a semicolon, the conjunctive adverb, and no comma because it's one of the five. Okay, compound predicate. This is I'm going to call it a subclass of a compound sentence. So a compound sentence has two subjects and two predicates. Going back, see you have you have subject and predicate, subject and predicate. So you have two subjects and two predicates with a compound sentence. A compound predicate is a simple sentence, or a simple sentence with a compound predicate has one subject that shares two predicates. And you do not separate the compound predicate with a comma unless it adds clarity or prevents a misreading, which is usually not the case. So let me tell you, the times you probably have to separate a compound predicate is, my default option is do not. So let's look at some examples. This is a compound predicate because here in red, he visited Brazil and stayed with family. See, there's no subject in this second half, of this simple sentence. So you have one subject that shares two predicates. But this is a compound sentence. He visited Brazil and he stayed with family. So here we have another subject. And with that, we would then need to put a comma. And this is where most people go wrong. They probably meant to write a compound sentence. All they really need to do is throw in the additional subject and you would need the comma. So what most people do is they write the second sentence here and they forget to put the subject here. And therefore it's wrong. So because you only put a comma in a compound predicate where it's not clear, or you need to add clarity or prevents a misreading. There's no way, or not to say there's no way, but misreading this sentence here is not likely. So I went to the grocery store. So I went to the grocery store and saw an old friend from high school. Once again, there's no subject over in the second half of this sentence. So it's a compound predicate. Therefore, there's no comma. But if you put in a second subject, then you would have to put in this comma right here. So this is one of these nuances. This is, so once you learn to recognize compound predicates and subjects, then you know if there's supposed to be a comma here. I think a lot of people would put this comma in this top one and they'd be wrong because it's actually a compound predicate, not a compound sentence. So there's your compound predicate. So let's move on to a comma splice and a run-on sentence. So a comma splice occurs when only a comma separates two independent clauses. The coordinating conjunction is missing. So here's an example of a comma splice. Our teacher graded the homework, comma, several students received perfect scores. You really are missing an and here. Now, a run-on sentence occurs when two independent clauses have no punctuation between them. It just runs on. It's just one long sentence like this. I mean, I actually did the separated by color just because it actually is confusing. When I had it all black and black text, it was sort of hard to read. Our teacher graded the homework. Several students received perfect grades. Basically, if you had all that run together, you have two independent clauses with no punctuation between them. Just nothing going on. So it just runs on. So, but you could solve this sentence or solve the problem of this sentence in several ways. You could put a period after homework and, of course, capitalize several. You could put a comma and an and, so, this turns it into a compound sentence. You could add like a semicolon, um, conjunctive adverb, and then a comma. Did I list a fourth? Nope. So I think I guess I'm thinking of a fourth way. I guess I only listed three. But here are three ways to correct this run-on sentence. So what's a complex sentence? Well, so this is, we are on our third one. We did a simple, we did a compound sentence. Now we're on the third type of sentence, a complex sentence. So that's where you have one independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. So remember, dependent clause has a subject and a predicate, or you can just say verb, and it starts with a subordinating conjunction. So what you have is one independent and one or more dependent. This is why it was super important to learn the difference between an independent and dependent clause during the grammar phase, because so much hinges on this. So you can learn to punctuate well, but also helps you construct better and correct sentences by knowing the difference. So a dependent clause may be joined to an independent clause in one of three ways. You could have an independent clause followed by an essential dependent clause. So what does essential mean? Essential means it's there. It's necessary for the meaning of the sentence. And when you have this case, there's no punctuation between the clauses. So here's, I broke my thumb, which is an independent clause, and before I took my summer vacation to Hawaii is a dependent clause, because you have subject and predicate all here, and you have a before is a subordinating conjunction. So I broke my thumb before I took my summer vacation to Hawaii is a complex sentence, one independent, one dependent, and since it's independent followed by essential dependent, then no comma. Because before I took my summer vacation helps define or limit or is essential to the meaning of when I broke my thumb. So the second way to do it is you do independent clause, comma, non-essential dependent clause. This is why this is important, because with a non-essential dependent clause, you put a comma. So I broke my thumb in January before I took my summer vacation in Hawaii. So I doubt, so since you said I broke my thumb in January, I doubt that before I took my summer vacation in Hawaii helps to define breaking your thumb in January, especially since it's a summer vacation. So you use a comma between these two. Now, I got to tell you, probably very often in writing, I'd see this written with no comma here. And I'd probably go, okay, close enough. Because really what the person is then doing is that they're saying this dependent clause is essential to the meaning. It's not truly essential to the meaning, but they're saying it's essential to the meaning. So they just wouldn't put the comma in. So the third way to separate them is you put the dependent clause first, comma, independent clause. Before I took my summer vacation in Hawaii, comma, I broke my thumb. So when you have dependent clause followed by independent clause, you actually put a comma between them. So this is one of the reasons why you put that comma there. Or this is one of the ways to start the sentence. Notice also that you've now learned how to write sentences or how to flip them, meaning you could actually take this sentence, I broke my thumb, or I broke my thumb before I took my summer vacation in Hawaii. You can write it this way with no comma, or you can flip and put the before and first and then separate it with a comma. So now you've learned how to sort of rearrange the sentence. But that's how you separate, or when you have a dependent independent clause, they may be joined to each other in one of three fashions. This is how they're joined, and also the punctuation that you use. So what is a compound complex sentence? Well, compound complex sentence consists of two or more independent clauses and one or more dependent clauses. Just really a combo of compound and complex. So the rules of punctuating them are the same as the rules for compound and complex sentences. So if you're unsure of those, just go back, because I actually show you how they're joined and how the commas go. So you just combine those, and you combine the rules to how you get the patterns and the punctuation. And I just want to say, when either independent clause contains a comma, consider, not a must, consider using a semicolon between the clauses. And remember, my three is a crowd rule, meaning once I get 3 commas, or the third comma, once I get to three and above, I generally use a semicolon to separate the independent clauses. Not a must, just consider. And see, I believe it was rule 10 and 20 in my book, or in the videos. I will make those videos and release them. So here's a compound complex sentence. So I broke my thumb. This is independent. Before I took my annual vacation in Hawaii, which is dependent clause, comma, but. So here I'm joining the clause, or I'm going to say the independent clauses. The doctor. So here, then you have this. The second clause is an independent clause. This long, it's pretty long. The doctor said I would be able to snorkel with a special covering over my cast. So here we have 2 independent and 1 dependent. I have met the definition of a compound complex sentence. The last example is Mary, who is my cousin from Idaho, is visiting me for the weekend, semicolon, and I hope she's not allergic to cats. So just start with the end of it. The second clause is an independent clause. And Mary, or this, who is my cousin from Idaho, is actually a relative clause. So a relative clause, remember, starts with a relative pronoun. It's actually a form of a dependent clause. And it's if you go back to the videos, the grammar videos, we'll learn that this is a non-essential relative clause. So it's separated with commas, because this relative clause does not help define Mary. We assume Mary is known from the context. So since it's non-essential, we would separate the relative clause. So that's why I have 2 commas here. Mary, who's my cousin, is visiting me for this weekend. Then once again, I'm just using my 3 as a roll crowd, because if you have the comma here, it's probably less confusing than my previous example of how we had the items in a list, comma. You could probably get away with a comma here. I wouldn't say it's necessarily wrong, but it's it's something to consider. Remember, I said consider using the semicolon. I chose to use the semicolon because I can, but I wouldn't necessarily say a comma is wrong. So that is it for this video. If you want to get alerts for the video series, please click subscribe. If you like the video, or think others will find it useful, please click like, and check out links to books and videos in the description. Thank you.